Hey, my name is Chris Brennan, and in this video, I'm going to answer the question, how old is Western astrology? So this was a question that submitted to me recently through my page on Patreon. And to make a long story short, the answer is that the origins of Western astrology date back about 2,000 to 4,000 years ago, depending on how you define it. So, in terms of the written record and the written origins of Western astrology, that dates back about 4,000 years ago to about 2000 BCE. Because around this time in Mesopotamia, which is now located in what is now modern day Iraq, roughly, that's where we see them start to record, the ancient Mesopotamians start to record for the first time some astrological omens. And some of the earliest omens were probably connected with eclipses, where they would start noting down something that happened in the sky of a particular type of eclipse, and then what they expected to see happen on Earth. And some of these early records may have actually been motivated by empirical observations of historical events that had actually occurred, including things like the death of a king coinciding with an eclipse. So they would start writing down these observations of astrological omens on tiny clay tablets using the cuneiform language, starting about 4,000 years ago. And then eventually, this allowed them to build these large libraries of omens. And over the course of time, astrology and astronomy started to get increasingly complex. So that's the oldest sort of form of Western astrology, starting in Mesopotamia 4,000 years ago. But in terms of the more familiar type of astrology that we use today, that uses birth charts that contain the planets, the signs of the zodiac, the concept of the 12 houses, and the concept of aspects, that system really comes together about 2,000 years ago, sometime around the 2nd century BCE, probably in Hellenistic Egypt. And at that time, or shortly after that time, there's this new system of astrology that emerges that's primarily focused on looking at the birth charts, which are the alignment of the planets at the moment a person is born, and then creating this very elaborate interpretive framework that's based on the fourfold system of planets, signs, houses, and aspects. So that system is about 2,000 years old, dating to about the 2nd century BCE. So that means that the answer to the question is basically that Western astrology is about 2,000 to 4,000 years old, depending on how you define it. So, of course, after the Hellenistic tradition, after the 2nd century BCE and forward, the astrological tradition continued to develop, and there were new traditions and new things that were added, new planets eventually that were discovered, and new technical innovations that were made over the course of the past 2,000 years. So there was the medieval astrological tradition that happened after the fall of the Roman Empire, when there was a lot of new techniques and a lot of new innovations in things like mundane astrology and the prediction of world events. Later, there was the Renaissance tradition that happened during the Renaissance in Europe. And then more recently, over the past century, there was an explosion of modern astrology and the integration of depth psychology into astrology, where astrology became, for a period of time, more focused on character analysis and psychology, and not as much on the prediction of events. So, more recently, we've had a great flourishing of astrology and a revival of ancient astrology, and also a sort of synthesis that's taking place with modern astrology recently that's really created a unique moment in the astrological tradition where so many different techniques and traditions and approaches are available to contemporary astrologers and are being applied in different ways in practice. So it's truly a great time to be alive as an astrologer in terms of that and in terms of having access to the full extent of the astrological tradition, since so many translations have been made of ancient texts from the past 2 to 4,000 years, so that for the first time we can truly study the entire astrological tradition and start to incorporate as many good parts of it as we choose to in terms of our contemporary practice of astrology. But in terms of this historical question, the answer is that Western astrology is about 2 to 4,000 years old, depending on how you define it. But that's still a pretty long time, whatever definition you use. All right, so that's it for this answer. Let me know if you have any other questions about the history of astrology or astrology in general in the comment section below this video on YouTube. And otherwise, I'll see you again next time.